My son and his wife went out of town and left me to look after her mother, who was supposedly in a coma after an accident. The moment they drove away, she opened her eyes and whispered something that sent ice down my spine. "I'm so glad you're here with me. Stay with my story until the end, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from so I can see how far my voice travels." I never thought that at 64 years old I'd realize how little I truly knew about my own son. Grant had always been distant, even as a little boy. I told myself it was just his nature. Not everyone is affectionate, I reasoned. I clung to that explanation for years, especially after he married Emily 3 years ago. When Grant called me last Tuesday morning, his voice had that same familiar edge of duty instead of love. "Mom, Emily and I have to make an emergency trip to Seattle. Her mother had another episode, and we can't leave her alone." Marianne had been in what the doctors called a vegetative state for 6 months, ever since the car crash that caused severe brain damage. She lay in a hospital bed set up in Grant's guest room, hooked up to machines that kept her breathing, a silent, unmoving presence in their home. "Of course, sweetheart," I heard myself say, even as something in his tone made my stomach twist. "How long will you be gone?" "Just 4 days, maybe 5. He hesitated, then added, "The nurse will come twice a day, at 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. to check her vitals and adjust her meds. You just need to be there in case of emergencies." I should have pressed him. I should have asked why they couldn't hire a full-time caregiver if Marianne needed constant supervision. But I was so pathetically grateful that my son needed me at all that I pushed those little alarm bells aside. On Thursday morning, I arrived at Grant's house in Riverside with a small overnight bag. The place always felt cold to me despite the designer furniture and flawless decor. Emily opened the door with her usual practiced smile, the kind that never quite reached her eyes. "Thank you so much for doing this, Lorene," she said, her voice warm but strangely hollow. "Mother has been so peaceful lately. The doctors say she's stable, but we just can't risk leaving her alone." Grant appeared behind her, already checking his watch. "Our flight leaves in 3 hours. The nurse, Mrs. Patterson, will be here at 9 in the morning and 6 in the evening every day. Her medications are all labeled in the kitchen." I followed them down the hall to the guest room, where Marianne lay motionless in the hospital bed. The machines around her beeped quietly, tracking her heart rate and oxygen. Her silver hair had been brushed neatly, and someone had carefully applied soft pink lipstick to her pale mouth. She looked almost serene, like someone in a very deep sleep. "She hasn't shown any signs of consciousness in months," Emily murmured, standing by the bed. "Sometimes I talk to her, hoping she can hear me, but the doctors say there's probably no awareness left." Something in the way she said it made me study her face more closely. There was a chill in her expression that didn't match the concern in her voice. Grant leaned in and brushed a quick kiss against my cheek, a purely automatic gesture. "We'll call tonight to check in. Emergency numbers are on the fridge." Then they were gone, their expensive luggage rolling across the marble floor, the front door closing with a soft click that somehow felt incredibly final. I stood alone in the hallway for a moment, listening to the house settle around me. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic beeping from Marianne's room. I went back to check on her, tugging the blanket up where it had slipped and reaching out to smooth her hair. That's when it happened. The second my fingers brushed her forehead, Marianne's eyes flew open. I gasped and stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs. Her blue eyes, clear, focused, undeniably aware, locked onto mine with such intensity that it stole my breath. "Thank God," she whispered, her voice faint but absolutely conscious. I was beginning to think they'd never leave. I felt the color drain from my face. "Marianne, you're awake." She tried to push herself up and winced. "Help me, please. I've been lying still for so long my muscles are cramping." My hands trembled as I adjusted her pillows and helped her shift. My mind was spinning, struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. "But the doctors said, Grant and Emily told me you were in a coma." Marianne let out a harsh, bitter laugh, the sound edged with something far deeper than physical pain. "Oh, my dear Lorene, there's so much you don't know." She tightened her grip around my hand with surprising strength. They think I'm in a coma because that's what they want to believe, what they need everyone else to believe. I don't understand, I whispered, sinking into the chair beside her bed. Marianne's eyes filled with tears, but her voice didn't waver. They're drugging me, Lorene. Every day, sometimes twice a day, Emily gives me injections that knock me out completely. She tells everyone the injections are medications prescribed by my neurologist, but they're not. The room seemed to tilt around me. That's impossible. Why would they do something like that? Because, Marianne said, her voice dropping to a thin whisper, they're stealing everything I own, and they need me unconscious so I can't stop them. I stared at her, my mouth suddenly dry, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. What do you mean, stealing? Marianne closed her eyes for a moment, as if she had to gather her strength just to keep talking. My bank accounts, my investments, my house in Portland. They've been forging my signature, claiming I signed over power of attorney while I was supposedly comatose. They've already transferred more than $200,000 out of my retirement fund. The figure hit me like a punch to the chest. $200,000. But Grant would never, I stammered. He's my son. Your son, Marianne said quietly but firmly, is not the man you think he is. And Emily? Her voice hardened. Emily is a monster. My stomach churned with a mix of denial and rising dread. How do you even know all of this if they're keeping you drugged? Because sometimes I manage to fight the drugs long enough to stay half awake, she said. They think I'm completely out, so they don't bother to leave the room when they talk. Last week I heard Emily on the phone with someone laughing about how easy it's been to fool everyone. She said the hardest part was pretending to cry at the hospital. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. This can't be real. This can't be happening. It gets worse, Marianne whispered, and the tone of her voice made ice spread through my veins. They're not planning to keep this going forever. I heard them arguing about timing, about when to just let me slip away naturally. Her words hung between us like a death sentence. I could barely breathe. They want to kill you, I said slowly, the words feeling strange and heavy on my tongue. Marianne nodded. And, Lorene, I think you might be in danger too. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat frozen in the chair, staring at this woman I'd believed to be completely unconscious, trying to process a reality that felt like a nightmare. What do you mean I might be in danger? I managed, my voice barely audible. Marianne struggled to sit up straighter, and I instinctively leaned forward to help, my hands trembling. You're here as their witness, Lorene. The loving grandmother, staying out of pure kindness to care for her son's poor, helpless mother-in-law. When something happens to me, you'll be the one who swears under oath that I never showed any signs of consciousness. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. They were using me. They were using both of us. You still have a chance to walk away from this, Marianne said, her voice carrying the weight of years of hurt. I don't. I shot to my feet and paced to the window. Outside, the neighborhood looked perfectly ordinary. Kids running around front lawns, neighbors walking their dogs, cars passing leisurely down the street. How could something so evil be happening in a place that looked so normal? Tell me everything, I said finally, turning back to her. From the beginning. Marianne drew a shaky breath. The car accident was real. I was truly unconscious for about a week in the hospital, but when I started to wake up, when the doctors began talking about rehab and recovery, Emily convinced them I was having setbacks. She told them I was agitated, confused, sometimes violent. Were you? No. Her answer was immediate, but she was at every medical consultation, playing the devoted daughter. She persuaded them that moving me home for palliative care was the kindest option. Marianne let out a hollow, bitter laugh. The doctors thought they were helping a loving family avoid prolonged suffering. I sank back into the chair. My legs felt like they couldn't hold me up anymore. And Grant? Does he know what she's doing? Marianne's expression darkened. Oh, he knows. It was his idea to start forging my signature. Emily manages the drugs and the medical lies, but Grant is the brains behind the financial side. The word fraud echoed in my mind and made my stomach twist. My son, the little boy I rocked to sleep, sang lullabies to, worried over every time he had a fever, was a criminal. How long has this been going on? The heavy drugging started about 3 months ago, she said. At first, it was just mild sedatives that Emily claimed were to help with my supposed agitation. But the doses kept increasing. Some days I'd be unconscious for 18 hours straight. The money transfers started as soon as they brought me home from the hospital. Small amounts at first, just a few thousand here and there. Once they realized how easy it was, they got greedy. How much have they taken? As of last month, when I was awake long enough to overhear a phone call, they had moved nearly $400,000 out of my accounts. My house in Portland is listed for sale, and I never signed a single document. They forged my signature using some legal loophole about incapacitated relatives. $400,000. The number made my head spin. My mind flashed to Grant's luxury car, the remodel they'd done on the kitchen, Emily's designer wardrobe and jewelry. I'd always assumed his consulting business was simply doing well. The nurse who comes twice a day, I blurted suddenly. Mrs. Patterson? Is she part of this? Marianne shook her head. No, she's legitimate, Marianne said. But Emily times the injections perfectly. She gives me the strongest dose about an hour before each nursing visit. Mrs. Patterson has never seen me in any state other than unconscious. What about the machines, the monitors? I asked. They're real, Marianne replied, but they're not connected to any hospital system. They only track basic vital signs. As long as my heart is beating and I'm breathing, everything looks normal to anyone who doesn't know what they're looking at. A cold shiver ran down my spine. You said they're planning to let you naturally slip away? What does that mean? Marianne was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady even though her eyes were wet. I overheard them talking about it 2 weeks ago. Emily was researching how to slowly increase dosages to cause respiratory failure. She found medical forums explaining how certain drug combinations can create what looks like natural complications in coma patients. The room seemed to spin. They're planning to murder you, I said. Yes, she answered calmly. And they're going to make it look like a tragic but expected outcome. The loving family who did everything they could, but sometimes these things just happen. Marianne wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Emily has already started telling Mrs. Patterson that my breathing seems more labored lately, that my color looks off. She's setting the stage. I shot to my feet again, unable to stay seated. We have to call the police. We have to stop this. With what evidence? Marianne asked gently. It's my word against theirs. The medical records all support their version. The financial transfers were done with forged signatures that appear legitimate. And on paper, I'm supposed to be in a vegetative state. But you're conscious now, I insisted. You can tell them what really happened. Can I? She asked quietly. Or will I just be a confused old woman with brain damage making wild accusations about her devoted family? Her voice carried the weary certainty of someone who had already played out every scenario in her mind. Emily has been very careful to create a record of my supposed mental decline. She even got me labeled with early-stage dementia based solely on behaviors she described to the doctors. The sheer precision of their scheme took my breath away. How long do you think we have? From what I heard, Marianne said, they plan to start the final phase when they get back from this trip. They wanted me to have a few days under the care of loving family before the tragic downturn. They needed a witness who could talk about my peaceful final days. That's where you come in. The realization crashed over me. They hadn't asked me here because they needed help. They needed an alibi, a perfect one. Grant's devoted mother, willing to sacrifice her own comfort to care for his wife's poor, unconscious mother. Who better to swear that they had done everything possible and grieved honestly when she finally passed? My stomach twisted. All those calls over the last few months, Grant asking how I was, if I needed anything, I had thought he was finally trying to reconnect. He was keeping tabs on you, Marianne said softly, making sure you were stable, predictable and completely unsuspecting. "I'm sorry, Lorene, but your son has been using you just like he's using everyone else." The last scrap of hope I'd been holding on to crumbled. Grant didn't need me. He didn't love me. He was turning me into an unknowing accessory to murder. "What are we going to do?" I whispered. Marianne gripped my hand, her eyes blazing with a fierceness I hadn't expected. "We're going to beat them at their own game." Over the next several hours, Marianne told me things that made my blood run cold. We kept our voices low even though we were alone, as if the walls themselves might carry our words back to Grant and Emily. "The first time I realized something was wrong was about 4 months ago," Marianne began, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I was finally starting to feel like myself again after the accident. Physical therapy was helping, my memory was returning. That's when Emily started telling the doctors that I was having episodes." "What kind of episodes?" I asked. "According to her," Marianne said bitterly, "I became violent whenever she tried to help me with basic tasks. She claimed I didn't recognize her, that I screamed and tried to hit her. She even showed up to one appointment with scratches on her arms." Marianne's lips curled in disgust. "Scratches she gave herself." My stomach turned at the thought of Emily's performance. "And the doctors believed her?" "Why wouldn't they?" Marianne replied. "She was the devoted daughter, worn out from caring for her traumatized mother. She would cry during the appointments, talk about how heartbreaking it was to see me so confused and aggressive. She even brought Grant once to back up her story." "What did Grant say?" Marianne's expression hardened. "He played his role perfectly, talked about how hard it had been on Emily, how worried he was about her mental health from all the stress. He suggested maybe medication could help calm me so Emily could keep caring for me at home." The calculated nature of it all was staggering. "So the doctors prescribed sedatives?" I asked. "At first, yes," Marianne said, "mild ones." But Emily kept telling the doctors the meds weren't working. According to her, I was getting worse, more violent, more confused. At every appointment, she described a woman slipping deeper into madness. Marianne paused, closing her eyes briefly, as if the memory itself hurt. "That's when the doctors started prescribing stronger medications," she said. "And that's when Emily began preparing her own injections." "What do you mean?" I asked. "She'd show the doctors the prescription bottles, make sure they saw she was following instructions," Marianne explained. "But she was also adding her own mix, drugs she was getting from somewhere else." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I think she has connections from her old job." "Old job?" "She used to work at a rehab facility for elderly patients. She was fired about 5 years ago, but Grant never told me why. I later found out from a mutual friend that there had been some sort of investigation into medication irregularities with patients, but nothing was ever proven." Pieces of the puzzle were sliding into place, forming a picture so dark I could barely stand to look at it. "She's done this before," I murmured. "I think so," Marianne said, "and I think that's how she and Grant really met. Not at that cute little coffee shop like they tell everyone, but through some connection involving her work with vulnerable elderly people." She shifted, grimacing slightly. "Grant has always been attracted to easy money, even as a teenager. Remember when he got caught selling fake IDs in high school?" I did remember, though I'd spent years trying to forget. He'd been suspended for 2 weeks, and I'd practically lived in the principal's office, apologizing and defending him. Back then, I told myself it was just a phase. "He didn't grow out of it," Marianne said quietly. "He just learned to hide it better." Her voice carried a sorrow that went far beyond her own suffering. "Lorene, you need to understand something. This isn't just about the money for them. They enjoy it, the control, the lies, the power they have over someone who can't fight back." "What do you mean?" I asked, my skin prickling. "Sometimes when they think I'm deeply under, they talk to me anyway," Marianne said. "Emily will lean over and whisper about how pathetic I am, how no one will miss me when I'm gone. Grant talks about all the things they'll buy with my money, the trips they'll take." Her voice faltered for the first time. "They've turned my suffering into entertainment." Heat rose in my chest, pure, blinding rage. Those monsters, I breathed. Last week, when they were sure I was heavily sedated, I heard them talk about the timeline, she continued. They want everything wrapped up before the holidays. They've already booked a Mediterranean cruise, a month-long luxury trip, paid for with my money. They want me dead so they can enjoy it without any loose ends. A cruise, I repeated, sick to my stomach. The casual way they were planning to celebrate her death made me want to scream. $15,000 for 4 weeks, Marianne said flatly. The deposit is already paid. She fixed her gaze on me. They intend to play the grieving relatives who just need time away to heal. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. How do you know all these details? Because they aren't nearly as careful as they think they are, she replied. When you assume someone is unconscious, you stop watching what you say. When you're excited about your schemes, you get chatty. She gave a faint, bitter smile. They've basically confessed everything within earshot of the vegetable in the bed. What exactly is the plan? I asked. Marianne inhaled slowly, bracing herself. Once they get back from Seattle, Emily is going to start documenting what she calls worrying changes in my condition. She'll tell Mrs. Patterson and maybe even bring in another nurse for a second opinion. She's going to say my breathing seems strained, my color is off, that there are signs of organ failure. But you're fine, I protested. For now, Marianne said, but she's going to increase the drug dosages to create those symptoms. Respiratory depression, irregular heartbeat, all the signs that my body is shutting down. Her tone was almost clinical, like she was describing someone else's death, not her own. The genius of their plan is that it will look completely natural. A brain-damaged woman whose body finally gives up. How long do they expect it to take? I asked. From what I overheard, about 10 days, she said. Long enough that it seems medically plausible, but not so long that it becomes inconvenient. They want me dead before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was less than 3 weeks away. And then? I forced myself to ask. What happens once you're gone? They inherit everything through Emily as my next of kin, Marianne replied. The house, whatever money is left, my life insurance. They've already checked the probate laws to make sure there won't be any hiccups. Her voice turned icy. They've even picked out my burial plot, the cheapest one they could find. No reason to waste money on the dead. I was shaking, part fury, part terror. We have to stop them. We need proof. I've been trying to think of a way for months, Marianne said, but everything they've done is built to look legitimate. The medical charts, the banking paperwork, the witnesses who can swear I've been unresponsive this whole time, it all backs up their story. But we know the truth now, I insisted. We do, she agreed. But knowing and proving are two very different things. She looked at me with a fierce, pleading intensity. That's why I need you, Lorene. You are the only person who has seen me awake. You're the only one who knows what they're really doing. What do you want me to do? I asked. Marianne was silent for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was stronger than it had been all day. I want you to help me gather evidence, real evidence, the kind even the best lawyer can't explain away. How? I whispered. They think they're so clever, but they've made one crucial mistake. Her eyes lit with a fierce, almost frightening clarity. They trust you completely. Grant is convinced his sweet, naive mother would never suspect anything. He thinks you're the perfect witness because you're too innocent to see what's really going on. So, we use that, I said slowly. Exactly. Over the next few days before they come back, I need you to help me find proof, bank records, medication bottles, anything that exposes what they've been doing. Her fingers tightened around mine. And when they return and start the final phase, we'll be ready for them. What if they sense something's wrong? What if they realize you're conscious? Marianne actually smiled. For the first time since this nightmare began, there was real hope in her expression. Then we'll give them the performance of their lives. We'll let them believe they're winning right up until the moment we destroy them. A shiver ran through me, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. For the first time in my life, I was going to fight back against the people who had used and manipulated me, and this time, we were going to win. The next 2 days blurred into a quiet, careful investigation. Marianne and I worked together like partners in a crime drama, except the crime was real and still unfolding around us. We only moved when Mrs. Patterson wasn't scheduled to visit. During the nurses' rounds, Marianne would lie perfectly still and I would play my role, the worried caregiver, attentive and polite, asking all the right questions. Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman in her 50s, clearly cared about her patients. Watching her gently adjust Marianne's blanket, check her vitals, and record readings with such calm professionalism made it even more obvious how thoroughly Grant and Emily had deceived everyone. "Her breathing seems steady today," Mrs. Patterson said during her Friday morning visit, jotting notes on her chart. "How was she overnight?" "Very peaceful," I replied, hating how easily the lie slipped out. "No changes that I noticed." When she left, we went straight back to work. "Check the filing cabinet in Grant's office," Marianne whispered. "Top drawer behind the tax documents, that's where they keep the forged papers." I did as she said and found exactly what she'd described. Copies of power of attorney forms, medical directives, and bank authorization documents, all bearing Marianne's signature. But when I compared them to her real handwriting on old Christmas cards I'd found in a drawer, the differences were obvious to anyone who looked closely. "They practiced," Marianne explained when I brought everything back to her. "I caught Emily tracing my signature on sheets of paper months ago. When I asked, she said she was helping me write thank you notes for get well cards." She gave a bitter shake of her head, and I believed her. We uncovered even more in their bedroom closet, records of illegal drug purchases. Emily had been ordering sedatives from shady online pharmacies using fake prescriptions and multiple identities. The shipping confirmations were all there, bundled together in a box. "She's been having the packages sent to different addresses," I told Marianne, snapping photos of every document with my phone. "Post office boxes, neighbors' homes when they're out of town, even your old address in Portland." "How much has she spent?" Marianne asked. I did a quick total of the receipts. "Over $3,000 in the last 4 months, all of it paid for with transfers from your accounts." The irony was nauseating. They were using Marianne's own money to buy the drugs they intended to kill her with. But the most chilling discovery came when I found Emily's journal. "She keeps a diary?" Marianne asked when I told her, her eyes widening. "Not exactly a diary," I said, feeling sick, "more like a planning log." Tucked behind a row of books in their bedroom, the notebook was filled with neat clinical handwriting. Every page was another piece of their monstrous plan. The drug combinations, the timings, observations about how Marianne's body responded to different dosages. "She's been documenting everything," I said, "like you're some kind of case study." Marianne was quiet for a long moment. "Read some of it to me." I flipped to a random page and began. October 15th, increased morning dose to 4 ml. Subject remained unconscious for 19 hours. Breathing stable but heart rate dropped to 58 BPM. Need to adjust to avoid suspicious readings during nurse visits. "She's treating me like a lab experiment," Marianne murmured, her voice barely audible. I turned another page. October 22nd. Subject showed signs of awareness at around hour 16, made soft sounds when repositioned, administered additional dose immediately. Note: may need to increase standard dosage to prevent breakthrough consciousness. "My God, Marianne," I whispered, "she's been refining how to keep you under more effectively." "What else does it say?" she asked. I scanned further, my stomach tightening with every line. October 28th, discussed timeline with G. Agreed to begin final phase after Seattle trip. Will document declining conditions starting November 1st. Estimate 10 to 12 days to complete respiratory failure. G excited about December cruise, suggested upgrading to suite with our windfall. Marianne closed her eyes, but not before I saw the tears forming there. They're talking about my death like they're planning a vacation. The last entry made my blood run cold. November 2nd, Elle will be perfect witness to final days. Her testimony about peaceful final weeks will be crucial for any insurance investigations. G says his mother has always been easy to manipulate. I lowered the journal, my hands shaking. In ink and dates and careful notes, we were holding exactly what Marianne had asked for, real evidence. And suddenly, their perfect plan didn't look so perfect anymore. She'll never suspect a thing. Can't wait to finish this and move on with our lives. I set the journal down, my hands shaking with rage. She calls you the subject and me just Elle like we're not even people, I muttered. Because to them, we aren't, Marianne said quietly. We're obstacles to remove and tools to use. When she opened her eyes again, I expected despair. Instead, I saw cold, clear determination. Did you get photos of everything? She asked. Every page, I replied. Good. Now we put it all back exactly where it was. They can't suspect we know anything. We spent the rest of Friday carefully returning every document and bottle to its original place, matching angles and stacks as best we could. Marianne coached me on how to behave once Grant and Emily came home. Remember, you've been taking care of an unconscious woman for 3 days. You should look tired, a little frazzled. Ask them lots of questions about my condition and what to watch for. Be the worried, slightly overwhelmed mother-in-law. On Saturday morning, Mrs. Patterson arrived for her usual visit. As she checked Marianne's vitals, she said something that sent a fresh bolt of fear through me. Has anyone else been giving her extra medication? She asked, frowning at the chart. Her heart rate is a bit lower than usual. My mouth went dry. Just what's on the schedule you gave me, I answered. Mrs. Patterson's brow furrowed. Well, vitals can fluctuate. I'll make a note for her primary care doctor. She looked at me with sympathy. How are you holding up, dear? This can't be easy. I'm managing, I said, though inside I was screaming. She was literally seeing the effects of Emily's drugging without realizing what she was really looking at. After she left, Marianne and I immediately dissected what the nurse had noticed. They've been dosing me even when they're not here, I realized. There must be some kind of delayed delivery. Check the IV bag, Marianne suggested. Emily changes it every day before the nurse comes. She might have modified this one before they left. I examined the IV line more closely and noticed a small extra chamber attached to the tubing, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. That's it, Marianne said when I described it. She's been giving me extended doses through the IV. That's why it's been so hard for me to stay awake for long. Should I take it off? I asked. No, she said firmly. If Mrs. Patterson sees a sudden change in my vitals before Grant and Emily get back, it might trigger questions we're not ready for. Time was slipping away from us. That morning, Grant had texted to say their flight was delayed, but they'd be home by Sunday evening. That left us less than 36 hours to finalize everything. What exactly do we do when they get here? I asked. We let them start the final phase exactly as they planned, Marianne said, but this time we'll be recording every second. On Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. Grant's name lit up the screen and my heart started pounding. Hi, sweetheart, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Mom, change of plans, he said. Our flight got moved up. We'll be home in about 3 hours instead of tonight. My blood turned to ice. We weren't ready. Oh, that's wonderful, I said smoothly. I know you're anxious to get back and check on Marianne. She's been about the same. Mrs. Patterson says her vitals are stable. She seems very peaceful. The lie tasted like ash. Good, he said. Listen, Mom, I want to prepare you. The nurse mentioned that her condition could start declining soon. That's common with brain injuries. Patients can seem stable for a long time and then suddenly worsen. He was already planting the story, just like Marianne had predicted. Oh no, I breathed. What should I watch for? Changes in her breathing, her color, things like that, he replied. But don't worry, Emily will know what to do when we get back. Of course, I'll see you soon, I said, and hung up. I rushed to Marianne's room. 3 hours, I said. She didn't flinch. That's enough time to set up the recording equipment and finish our preparations. Recording equipment? I repeated, stunned. Marianne smiled, a flash of dark satisfaction in her eyes. Did you really think I've been lying here helpless all these months without making any plans? There's a box hidden in the basement behind the water heater. Bring it." I found the box exactly where she said it would be. When I opened it, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. A small digital audio recorder, a tiny camera, and several pieces of what looked like professional surveillance gear. "Where did you get all this?" I asked, carrying it back upstairs. "I ordered it online months ago once I understood what they were doing," she said. "It took weeks of pretending to be unconscious while packages were delivered, but I managed to hide everything before they noticed." Her eyes gleamed with grim triumph. "They think they're brilliant. They have no idea I've been getting ready to destroy them." We worked as fast as we could, positioning the hidden camera where it had a clear view of Marianne's bed and setting up the audio recorder where it would capture every word. My hands shook, but beneath the fear was a sharp, burning excitement. In just a few hours, Grant and Emily would walk through that door certain they were about to execute their perfect plan. Instead, they'd be stepping right into a trap. "Are you ready?" Marianne asked quietly as we heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked at her. This woman who had endured months of terror and cruelty and was still brave enough to fight back. "I'm ready," I said. The front door opened, and I heard Emily's cheerful voice call out, "We're home!" The final phase was beginning. "Lorene, we're back," she called again, that familiar sugar-sweet tone in her voice, one I now recognized as a warning sign, not a welcome. I heard their footsteps in the hallway, the soft rumble of suitcase wheels over the marble. Marianne gave my hand one quick squeeze and then went completely slack, her eyes closing as she sank back into her role. The change was so total, so convincing, that for a split second even I almost believed she was truly unconscious. "How is she?" Grant asked as he appeared in the doorway. His face wore what anyone else would have called genuine concern, but now I could see the calculation behind his expression. "Very peaceful," I replied, standing from the chair beside Marianne's bed. "Mrs. Patterson came this morning. She said her vitals are stable, but mentioned her heart rate seemed a little slower than usual." I watched Emily's face closely as I spoke. For a heartbeat, something flashed there, satisfaction, before she quickly arranged her features into a mask of worry. "Oh dear," she murmured, moving to Marianne's bedside. "Sometimes that can be a sign her condition is changing." She laid her hand on Marianne's forehead with exaggerated tenderness. "Poor mother. She's been fighting so hard for so long." Grant stepped up beside her, and for a moment they looked like the perfect, devoted couple caring for a dying parent. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have been moved by the scene. "The nurse said we should watch for any changes," I said carefully. "What exactly should I be looking for?" "Well," Emily replied, still stroking Marianne's hair with that fake gentleness, "with brain injuries like Mother's, patients can decline very suddenly. Their breathing can become labored, their color can change. It's all part of the natural progression of her condition." The way she said natural progression made my skin crawl. She was already laying out the script for Marianne's death. "Is there anything we can do to help her?" I asked, playing my role as the concerned but clueless mother-in-law. Grant and Emily shared a look that lasted just a fraction too long. "We just need to keep her comfortable," Grant said. "Make sure she's not in pain." "The medications help with that," Emily added smoothly. "I'll need to adjust her dosages based on how she's been responding while we were gone." My pulse spiked. This was it. They were about to begin the final phase. "Should I stay to help?" I offered. "I could take some time off work." "That's so thoughtful of you, Mom," Grant said, and for just a moment the warmth in his voice almost sounded real. "But you've already done so much. You should go home and rest." "Actually," Emily cut in, her tone tightening slightly, "I think it would be better if Lorene stayed tonight, just to make sure everything goes smoothly while we transition back to our normal routine." Grant looked at her, clearly thrown off. This wasn't what they'd originally planned. "Emily, I think Mom's done enough." "No, I insist," she said, smiling a smile that never reached her eyes. "Families should be together during difficult times." Something in her voice set off alarms in my head. This wasn't about support, this was about control. "Of course I'll stay," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Whatever you need." Over the next few hours, I watched them slide back into their usual pattern with growing horror. Emily checked and rechecked the medication schedule, making meticulous notes about dosages and timing. Grant sat at his laptop, and every time I glanced over, I saw travel websites and what looked like bank accounts on the screen. During dinner, takeout Chinese, eaten mostly in silence, Grant's phone buzzed. He looked at the message and smiled in a way that made my stomach knot. "Good news?" Emily asked. "The cruise line confirmed our upgrade," he said, "penthouse suite with a private balcony." He glanced at me and added casually, "We're taking a long vacation after the holidays. We've been under so much stress with Marianne's condition." "That sounds wonderful," I managed. "You both deserve a break." The way they calmly discussed their murder vacation while Marianne lay just down the hall made me feel physically ill. Later that evening, as we sat in the living room, Emily launched into what sounded like a well-practiced speech. "Lorene, I want you to know how much it means to us that you've been so involved in Mother's care," she said. "It really shows what kind of person you are." "She's always been dependable," Grant added, reaching over to pat my hand. "Even when I was growing up, Mom was always there when we needed her." The bitter irony of his words wasn't lost on me. I had been there, especially when he needed someone to cover for him. "I just want to help," I said quietly. "You've helped more than you know," Emily replied, her voice dropping into a more serious register. "But I need to prepare you for what might happen in the next few days. The doctors warned us that Mother's condition could decline quickly." "What do you mean?" I asked. Grant leaned forward, his expression solemn. "With brain injuries, patients can seem stable for months and then suddenly deteriorate. Their body systems start to fail, one by one." "It's heartbreaking," Emily added, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "But in a way, it's also a blessing." "Mother won't suffer much longer," Emily finished softly. They were so smooth, so polished in their performance that if I hadn't heard Marianne's story or seen the evidence with my own eyes, I would have believed every word. "Is there anything I can do to help during this difficult time?" I asked. "Just be here," Grant said. "Having family around makes it easier to cope." Emily nodded. "And if anything happens, if Mother suddenly takes a turn, we'll need you to help people understand that we did everything we could." There it was, the real reason they wanted me to stay. Not for support, for my testimony. Around 10 o'clock, Emily announced it was time for Marianne's evening medications. "This might be a good learning experience for you, Lorene," she said as we walked to the bedroom, "in case you ever need to help with her care again." I watched, sickened, as she calmly prepared the injection. She chatted lightly about each medication while she pulled liquid from multiple vials into a single syringe. "This one's for pain," she said, holding up one bottle. "This is for muscle spasms, and this one helps her sleep peacefully." That peaceful sleep drug, I knew, was the sedative designed to keep Marianne under for the next 18 hours. As Emily slid the needle into Marianne's IV line, I had to fight the urge to grab her hand and stop her, but we needed them to reveal more. We needed them to feel safe. Marianne had insisted she could endure whatever they gave her for one more night. "How long before it takes effect?" I asked. "Usually within 15 minutes she's in a deep sleep," Emily replied, dropping the used needle into a sharps container. "She won't wake up until late tomorrow morning." Grant appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay in here?" "Just fine," Emily said smoothly. "Mother should rest comfortably now." She smoothed the blanket over Marianne with false tenderness. "Sweet dreams, Mother." As we left the room, my stomach twisted, knowing Marianne was already fighting to stay conscious against the drugs coursing through her veins. At the same time, a fierce pride swelled in me for her courage and resolve. Back in the living room, Grant poured himself a scotch while Emily made tea. The air felt lighter, almost festive, as if they were trying not to show how pleased they were. "I'm exhausted," Emily announced after finishing her cup. "I think I'll turn in early. Lorene, The guest room is ready for you." "Actually," Grant said, setting his glass down a little too hard, "I think we need to have a conversation first." Something in his tone made both Emily and me look up. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, cold, calculating, almost predatory. "Grant?" I said uncertainly. He walked to the window, pulled the curtains shut, then turned back to me. "Mom, I need you to understand something about what's happening here," he said. Emily stepped up beside him. Suddenly, they didn't look like a grieving couple anymore. They looked like a united front. "What situation?" I asked, though my heart was already hammering. "The situation with Marianne's condition," Grant said slowly, "and your role in what's going to happen over the next few days." I don't understand," I said. Grant and Emily shared another look. Whatever passed between them made the blood in my veins turn to ice. "Mom," Grant said, his voice shifting into the same tone he'd used as a teenager whenever he was about to lie and bully his way through a problem, "Marianne is going to die this week. And you're going to help us make sure no one asks any uncomfortable questions about it." The words hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd known what they were planning, hearing him say it out loud with such cool certainty made it horrifyingly real. "Grant, what are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Mom. It doesn't suit you." His voice was harder now, stripped of any warmth. "You've been here for 3 days. You've seen Marianne's condition. When she dies, and she will die very soon, you're going to tell everyone she went peacefully, surrounded by family who loved her." "You're scaring me," I whispered, and it wasn't entirely an act. Emily stepped forward, the sugary softness gone from her face. "You should be scared, Lorene, because you have a choice to make. You can be part of this family, or you can be a problem that needs to be solved." "What kind of choice is that?" I asked. Grant sat down across from me and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on mine. "Here's what's going to happen, Mom," he said. "Over the next few days, Marianne's condition is going to get worse. Her breathing will get harder. Her heart will start acting up. Eventually, her body will stop fighting. You're going to be here to see all of it." "You'll see how hard we try to save her," Emily added. "How devastated we are when we lose her. And when the paramedics arrive, when the police ask their routine questions, when the insurance people come around," Grant continued, "you're going to tell them exactly what you saw, a loving family doing everything they could for a severely brain-injured woman who finally lost her battle." I stared at them, these two people calmly outlining a murder and my role in covering it up. "And if I don't?" I asked. The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. "Mom," Grant said softly, "you're 64. You live alone. You don't have much family besides me. Accidents happen to elderly people all the time." The threat was crystal clear, no matter how gently he phrased it. For the first time since this began, I felt genuine, bone-deep fear for my own life. "You wouldn't," I breathed. "We really hope we won't have to," Emily said, her voice suddenly bright and sugary again. "We'd much rather have you as our ally than our enemy. After all, family should stick together." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to absorb what they'd just said. They weren't only planning to murder Marianne, they were perfectly willing to kill me too if I didn't go along with it. I need some time to think," I finally managed. "Of course you do," Grant said, standing and giving my shoulder a pat that felt more like a threat than comfort. "Take all the time you need. Just remember, Mom, we start tomorrow morning. We need to know you're with us." I walked to the guest room on unsteady legs, listening to their low voices in the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Predators discussing their prey. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, my whole body shaking. They had just threatened my life as casually as discussing the weather. Tomorrow, they planned to start killing Marianne in front of me and then force me to lie about it. But what they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that every word of that conversation had been captured by the hidden devices Marianne and I had planted around the house. The trap was already sprung, and they had marched straight into it. I hardly slept. Every creak of the house made me flinch. half expecting Grant or Emily to open the door and decide I was too dangerous to keep alive. But when morning light finally filtered through the curtains, I was still breathing, and more determined than ever to see this through. At 6 a.m., I heard soft movement in the hallway. Emily was beginning her morning ritual, checking on Marianne and preparing what she would claim were prescribed medications. I lay still, listening to her quiet footsteps and gentle humming, marveling at how normal she could sound while preparing to murder someone. Around 7, there was a soft knock at my door. "Mom, are you awake?" I opened it to find Grant standing there with a cup of coffee and an expression of tender concern. The act was so convincing that for a second I almost forgot who he really was. "I brought you coffee," he said gently. "I know last night was a lot." "Thank you," I said, taking the cup, my hands only slightly shaking. "Have you thought about what we talked about?" he asked. I looked into his eyes, my son's eyes, and saw no trace of the boy I'd once known. "Yes," I said quietly, "and I understand what you need from me." The words felt poisonous on my tongue. His shoulders relaxed, and he gave me a relieved smile. "I knew you'd see reason, Mom. Family has to stick together, especially in times like this." "Of course," I murmured. "I just want to help." "Good," he said. "Emily's going to start documenting changes in Marianne's condition today. She might need you to witness some of it, to confirm what you've seen." "I understand," I said. He patted my shoulder again, a touch that now made my skin crawl. "You're doing the right thing, Mom. This is what's best for everyone." When he left, I dressed quickly and went straight to Marianne's room. Emily was there, adjusting IV lines and writing on a chart. "How is she this morning?" I asked. "I'm concerned," Emily replied, her voice full of practiced worry. "Her breathing seems more labored than usual, and her color is off. I think we might be seeing the beginning of the decline the doctors warned us about." I looked down at Marianne. Her breathing was a little heavier, but I knew that was from whatever Emily had pumped into her the night before. "Should we call Mrs. Patterson?" I asked. "I already did," Emily said briskly. "She's coming this afternoon to reassess. I also called Dr. Brennan's office to report the changes." Dr. Brennan, Marianne's so-called neurologist, was another piece of their elaborate fiction. I wondered if he was real at all, or just another name Emily used to bolster her lies. "What can I do to help?" I asked. "Just stay with her while I get her morning medications ready," Emily said. "If you notice any changes in her breathing or color, let me know right away." I sat down beside the bed and took Marianne's hand. To anyone watching, I looked like a devoted relative offering comfort. In reality, I was feeling for the tiny signal we'd agreed on. A faint squeeze to tell me she was awake and aware inside her chemically fogged body. The pressure came, so slight most people would miss it. But I felt it. Marianne was there. Over the next few hours, Emily orchestrated what could only be described as a performance. She charted declining vitals, noted changes in breathing, and made concerned calls to medical professionals who may or may not actually exist. "I'm worried about fluid in her lungs," I heard her say on the phone, supposedly to Dr. Brennan's nurse. "Yes, I know it's common with long-term bed rest. Should we increase respiratory therapy?" Grant played his role just as convincingly, the distraught son-in-law watching his mother-in-law fade away. He made tearful calls to non-existent relatives, updating them on Marianne's spiraling condition. "I think we should prepare ourselves," he told me around lunchtime. "Emily thinks it might happen in the next 24 to 48 hours. "We really hope we won't have to," Emily said, her voice suddenly bright and pleasant again. "We'd much rather have you as our ally than our enemy. After all, family should stick together." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to absorb what they'd just admitted. They weren't only planning to kill Marianne. If I didn't cooperate, they were fully prepared to get rid of me, too. I need some time to think," I finally managed. "Of course you do," Grant said, standing and giving my shoulder a reassuring pat that felt more like a chokehold. "Take all the time you need. But remember, Mom, we start tomorrow morning. We need to know you're with us." On unsteady legs, I walked to the guest room. Behind me, I could hear their low voices in the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Predators discussing their prey. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, my entire body trembling. They had just threatened my life as casually as commenting on the weather, and tomorrow they planned to begin slowly murdering Marianne, forcing me to watch and later lie about every step. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that every word of their little family meeting had been captured by the hidden devices Marianne and I had planted around the house. The trap was already in motion, and they had walked straight into it. I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant door closing made me flinch, wondering if they'd decided I was too dangerous to leave alive until morning. But when dawn finally bled through the curtains, I was still breathing, and more determined than ever to see this through. At 6 a.m., I heard soft movement in the hall. Emily was starting her morning routine, checking on Marianne, preparing what she would later call doctor-prescribed medications. I lay still, listening to her light humming, marveling at how ordinary she sounded while methodically setting up a slow-motion killing. Around 7, there was a gentle knock at my door. "Mom, are you awake?" I opened it to find Grant standing there, holding a cup of coffee and wearing an expression of tender concern. The performance was so polished that for a second I almost believed it. "I brought you coffee," he said softly. "I know last night was a lot to take in." "Thank you," I replied, taking the cup with only a slight tremor in my hands. "Have you thought about what we talked about?" he asked. I looked into his eyes, the eyes of my son, and saw none of the boy I'd raised. "Yes," I said quietly, "and I understand what you need from me." The words tasted like poison. His shoulders relaxed, his face smoothing into something like relief. "I knew you'd see reason, Mom. Family has to stay together, especially now." "Of course," I murmured. "I just want to help." "Good. Emily's going to start documenting changes in Marianne's condition today. She might need you to witness some of those changes, so you can confirm what you saw if anyone asks." "I understand," I said. He patted my shoulder again, making my skin crawl. "You're doing the right thing, Mom. This is what's best for everyone." When he left, I dressed quickly and went to Marianne's room. Emily was there, fussing with IV lines and scribbling notes on a chart. "How is she this morning?" I asked. "I'm concerned," Emily answered, her voice full of rehearsed worry. "Her breathing seems more labored, and her color isn't good. I think we might be seeing the beginning of the decline the doctors warned us about." I looked at Marianne. Her breathing really was a bit heavier, but I knew it was from whatever Emily had pumped into her the night before. "Should we call Mrs. Patterson?" I asked. "I already did," Emily said briskly. "She's coming this afternoon to reassess. I also called Dr. Brennan's office to report the changes." Dr. Brennan, Marianne's so-called neurologist, was just another piece of their carefully crafted illusion. I wondered if he even existed at all. "What can I do to help?" I asked. "Just sit with her while I prepare her morning meds," Emily said. "If you notice any changes in her breathing or color, tell me right away." I sat beside the bed and took Marianne's hand. To anyone else, I looked like a loving relative keeping vigil. In reality, I was feeling for the tiny signal we'd agreed on, a faint squeeze to let me know she was conscious inside the drug fog. The pressure came, barely there, but real. Marianne was awake. Over the next few hours, Emily staged what could only be called a masterpiece of manipulation. She charted declining vitals, described altered breathing patterns, and made anxious calls to medical professionals who may or may not have been real. "I'm worried about fluid in her lungs," I heard her say on the phone, supposedly to Dr. Brennan's nurse. "Yes, I know it's a common complication with prolonged bed rest. Should we increase respiratory therapy?" Grant played his role to perfection as well. He acted like a devoted, grief-stricken son-in-law, making emotional phone calls to relatives and updating them on Marianne's supposed decline. "I think we should prepare ourselves," he told me around lunchtime. "Emily thinks it might happen in the next 24 to 48 hours. "So soon?" I gasped, sticking to my role as the shocked family member. "These things can move very quickly once they start," he said, squeezing my hand. "But at least she won't suffer much longer." Mrs. Patterson arrived right on time at 2 p.m. I watched anxiously as she checked Marianne, wondering if she'd notice anything off about this carefully manufactured decline. "Her oxygen saturation is lower than I'd like," she said with a frown, "and her heart rhythm is more irregular. Those can be signs of organ stress." "What does that mean?" I asked, even though I already knew I was looking at the effects of Emily's drugs. "It could mean her body is starting to shut down," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "I'll need to call Dr. Brennan and see if he wants to change her care plan." After she left, Emily looked satisfied. "See how it works?" she said quietly to me. "The nurse is documenting everything. When this is over, there'll be a clean medical trail showing a natural progression." That evening, as we sat down for what I knew would be our last dinner together, Grant opened a bottle of wine to celebrate getting through a rough day. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "To family," Emily echoed. "To family," I repeated, though the word felt hollow. As we ate, they talked about their future plans with the same casual cruelty I'd come to expect. The cruise, the house they wanted to buy with Marianne's money, the new car Emily had her eye on. "We're thinking of moving to Florida once everything settles," Grant said. "Fresh start. Too many sad memories here." "What about me?" I asked, leaning into their assumption that I'd stay part of their cover story. Grant and Emily shared another look. "We were hoping you'd visit often," Emily said sweetly. "Maybe even move down eventually. Family should stay close, especially after surviving something so traumatic together." They wanted me where they could keep an eye on me, ready to shut me up if I ever changed my mind. "That sounds wonderful," I said, smiling as if I meant it. Around 9 p.m., Emily announced it was time for Marianne's evening medications. "This might be the last dose we give her," she said quietly. "I'm going to increase the respiratory suppressants. If her body is already struggling, this will help ease her transition." Transition, such a soft word for what she was about to do. I followed them into Marianne's room and watched as Emily carefully prepared what I knew was a lethal cocktail. She was meticulous this time, measuring each amount and writing down all the dosages. "This is a merciful thing we're doing," she said as she drew the mixture into a syringe. "She's already gone, really. We're just helping her body catch up with where her mind already is." Grant nodded solemnly. "It's what she would have wanted." As Emily stepped toward the IV port with the syringe in her hand, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. This was the moment we'd been waiting for, the final, undeniable proof of their intent to kill. "Wait," I blurted. They both turned, Emily's hand frozen mid-air. "I want to say goodbye first," I said, moving quickly to the side of the bed, in case she doesn't wake up again." "Of course," Grant said softly. "Take your time, Mom." I leaned over Marianne, pretending to whisper a last farewell. Instead, I breathed one word. "Now." Marianne's eyes snapped open. The effect was like a lightning strike. Emily screamed and dropped the syringe, its contents splattering across the floor. Grant stumbled backward, all the color draining from his face. "Hello, Emily," Marianne said, her voice steady and clear as she pushed herself upright. "Surprised to see me awake?" For a moment, no one moved. It was as if a corpse had sat up in her own coffin. That's impossible," Emily stammered. "You've been unconscious for months. Your brain, damaged. You can't." "Can't what?" Marianne asked coolly. "Can't think? Can't remember? Can't plan?" She swung her legs over the side of the bed with startling ease. "Oh, my dear Emily, I remember everything, every injection, every forged signature, every dollar you stole." Grant finally found his voice. "This is some kind of episode. You're confused." "Am I?" Marianne reached toward the bedside table and picked up a small digital recorder. "Then maybe you can explain this." She pressed play. The room filled with Grant's voice from the night before. Marianne is going to die this week, and you're going to help us make sure no one asks any uncomfortable questions about it." Grant's face went from white to ashy gray. Emily looked like she might collapse. "Keep listening," Marianne said calmly. The recording continued. "Over the next few days, Marianne's condition is going to deteriorate. Her breathing will become labored, her heart rate will become irregular, and eventually her body will give up the fight." "You recorded us," Emily whispered. "For months," Marianne replied. "Every confession, every plan, every casual chat about my murder. Did you really think I was just going to lie here and let you ruin my life?" Grant lunged toward her, but Marianne lifted her hand, ready for what came next. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Marianne said calmly. "Those recordings are already with the police, the FBI, and the district attorney's office. They've been watching this house since yesterday afternoon." As if on cue, we heard car doors slam outside, followed by heavy footsteps on the front porch. "Police! Open the door!" Emily collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Grant just stood there, frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. "You see," Marianne went on in a conversational tone as the front door burst open and officers poured into the house with weapons drawn, "I've been cooperating with federal investigators for months. Healthcare fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder. You two have built quite a criminal resume." "Don't move! Hands where we can see them!" In seconds, Grant and Emily were on the ground, handcuffed, and read their rights. I watched, stunned, as the nightmare finally began to unravel. As they were being let out, Grant looked back at me with something that resembled hurt. "Mom, how could you do this to your own son?" I looked at him, this stranger who happened to share my blood, and felt nothing but relief. "You're not my son," I said quietly. "My son died a long time ago. You're just a criminal who shares my DNA." After the police left with their prisoners, Marianne and I sat together in the quiet kitchen, sipping tea and trying to process what had just happened. "How long have you been planning all of this?" I asked. "Since the moment I realized what they were doing," she replied. "I reached out to the FBI through a lawyer friend, and we've been building the case ever since." She smiled faintly. "They needed clear evidence of intent to kill. Your presence here as their chosen witness was the last piece we needed." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now they go to prison for a very long time," Marianne said. "The healthcare fraud alone can mean up to 20 years. Add elder abuse, theft, conspiracy to commit murder." She shrugged. "They'll be old by the time they see daylight again. And the money they stole? Already traced and returned. The FBI followed every transfer." Marianne reached across the table and took my hand. "Lorene, I can never thank you enough. Without you, they would have gotten away with it." I thought about how close they had come to pulling off the perfect crime. If I hadn't been there when Marianne woke up, if I hadn't found the courage to help her gather proof, Grant and Emily would be planning their cruise right now, and Marianne would be buried. "What will you do now?" I asked her. "Live," Marianne said simply. "For the first time in months, I can actually live without being afraid." She looked at me. "What about you?" I thought about it. At 64, my life had been completely reset. No son, no obligations, no one to live for except myself. "I think I might travel," I said, surprising myself as I said it out loud. "I've always wanted to see Ireland." Marianne's eyes brightened. "I've always wanted to see Ireland too. Maybe we could go together." The idea warmed something inside me I hadn't felt in a long time. "I'd like that," I said. "Very much." 6 months later, Marianne and I stood on the cliffs of Moher, watching the Atlantic crash against the rocks below. The wind whipped our hair around our faces, and we laughed like teenagers as we tried to take selfies with the wild coastline behind us. Grant and Emily had each received 25-year federal sentences. The trial became a media spectacle. Headlines about the son and daughter-in-law who tried to kill an elderly woman for her inheritance. I testified at the sentencing, looking both of them straight in the eye as I described the fear and betrayal I'd felt when they threatened my life. They never apologized. Even with decades in prison ahead of them, they insisted they were victims of some elaborate setup. But justice had been done. And more importantly, Marianne and I had found something neither of us expected: friendship, freedom, and a second chance at joy. As we walked back toward our rental car, Marianne slipped her arm through mine. "Where to next?" she asked. I smiled, feeling lighter and more alive than I had in years. "Anywhere we want," I said. And for the first time in my life, that was absolutely true. Now I'm curious about you, the one who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever gone through something similar? Tell me in the comments. And on the final screen, I'm leaving 2 more of the channel's favorite stories. They'll definitely surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until the end.